Hey, what's up, everybody? Before we get started, I just wanted to make a very quick announcement. So, since the time that I've started tutorials on the audio programmer, very much as a beginner in C++ myself, people have continuously come up to me and asked me about great courses for learning C++. And of course, we have that are programs on sites such as Udemy and Pluralsight, but they're more kind of generalist C++ things. There aren't any courses out there that are specifically catered towards what we do as audio programmers. Well, luckily, there's a person a lot more experienced than myself that has done a very comprehensive course on learning C++. So his name is Matt Cat Music, and he's a member of the audio programmer community, and you may have seen him on the JUCE forum if you've been there. And he's created a course that is very comprehensive. So if you have no coding experience, if you've never typed a line of code, then he helps you get started on downloading your first IDE, whether you're on Windows or Mac, and he'll take you from the very basic concepts of learning like stuff like functions and what are variables, all the way up to more complex concepts such as lambda functions, R-value references, and things that I haven't quite got a grasp on myself. So he takes you all the way from the beginning, all the way up to these complex concepts. And the best part about it is that it's catered specifically for audio programming. So the course is only on sale for the next 2 weeks. So you've only got 2 weeks to buy it. And then what happens is that the course then opens up. And then for the next 5 or 6 weeks, you will have access to Matt Cat. And he will have his own private Slack channel where he'll basically be able to work with you and answer any questions that you may have about the course. So if you order over the next week, then you actually save 33% if you use my discount code, which is the audio programmer. So to find out more information, you can come to my website, theaudioprogrammer.com. You click on the link here, and then it will lead you to a page where you can actually buy the course and you can get your discount code, and it runs you through the course outline. So go and check it out. Once again, the website is theaudioprogrammer.com. Just click on the link called Programming for Musicians, and be sure to use the discount code The Audio Programmer on checkout. Hey, what's up, everybody? I'd like to welcome you back to the Audio Programmer Podcast. And this week we have a very special guest, Chris Randall, who's from Audio Damage. How's it going, Chris?
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, great. So Chris is coming to us all the way from New Mexico, right?
No, Arizona.
Arizona. See, I kind of group all those together. Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico. That's what happens when you're living in England too long.
So New Mexico is weed and meth. And Arizona is only weed.
Oh yeah. I can see this is going to kick off into a great podcast. Great. So just a quick announcement. If you want to support the channel, be sure to head over to patreon.com/the audio programmer. We have loads of rewards, t-shirts, hoodies, stickers, and everything. So you can get all hooked up with that. Also, we have tickets on sale for the Audio Developer Conference, which is coming up in November. And I think that's a great place for us to start, Chris. So just last week, Chris came to me and he had a great idea for a panel for the Audio Developer Conference, which is going to be around product design and product development. So a lot of these conferences, we talk about the C++ and the math and the DSP and everything, but we don't really have a whole lot of product talks. So I think that's a great place for us to start. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
That's the thing. At the end of the day, most people get into this business because they want to be in the business and sell things, and I've been watching these conferences for years and gone to a few, and it's always super math heavy. And I'm a designer. I'm not, I barely graduated college, so I don't. Graduated high school. I never went to college, so I don't have the. While I find it interesting to watch someone talk about filters for 45 minutes, at the end of the day, I don't take much away from it. Mm-hmm. Whereas, when I watch design conferences, and they always have interesting panels on, on design, I thought and our industry is so particular, the needs of plug-in design particularly is so, it's a unique form of expression, at least as far as design goes. And I thought it'd be nice to have a panel that was just devoted to that.
Yeah, that's great. And we got some other people. We're still shuffling chairs in terms of who's actually on and who's not. But I think we're going to have a very promising lineup for that. So let's just jump into that to a little bit. So can you talk a little bit about your design philosophy and just what you think of because so Chris is he owns Audio Damage, and it's you and another guy, right? Yeah.
Adam Shaptek is. He does all the mathy bits, all the DSP and bookkeeping and all that, and I do the design and the customer facing side of things. Anything that the customer sees, I did. Anything that actually makes sound, he did. Basically, is how we divide things up. When I was a professional musician before this for some time, and Darwin Gross from Cycling 74 got it in his head that I could design that, since I had obviously, like, I have a visual sense, and he thought that I would do okay designing plugins. So he wrote me into this mode package it was an extension. Sorry, I keep hitting my desk. I know the camera's wobbling.
That's all right.
He made this mode. It's an extension to Pluggo back in the day, around 2001, I guess it came out. And so that was the first time I designed anything for audio, and I had done album covers and shit like that. But then he brought the project was a little too big for the two of us. In retrospect, it wasn't, but we didn't know any better. And so he brought in someone else from Cycling 74, Adam, and Adam and I hit it off, and we thought it was kind of silly to make Pluggo, which required this Pluggo framework from Cycling 74 to work, when we could just make normal plugins. And this was a fairly new, like, to just go start a plugin company wasn't really something anyone knew they could do. They weren't there were probably only a dozen or so when we started. And
what year is this?
2002.
Okay.
I suppose. So yeah, there was a lot of like, hey, I made this plugin, and put it on my website, but there wasn't a lot of actually making a go at it as a business model, other than the bigger companies. I think Force was around then. Obviously Native Instruments was, and but most of the plugins you got were NI or Steinberg had made them, and or they were freebies, like the Destroy Effects stuff, Smart Electronics, and so it was kind of a new thing when we did it. And I just brought in the same ethos I had. My wife and I owned a record label, at the time, and so we just marketed things. That's how I know how to market stuff. I'm a lifer in the music business. This is all I've ever done, and that's all I know. So we marketed plugins the same way we did, T-shirts and CDs, and it turned out to work out okay.
Yeah. And what is that? What do you feel that is, and how do you feel that when you were marketing these plugins, how did you take the experience from selling the CDs and the T-shirts and apply that?
The label I was on in the 90s, Wax Trax, was fairly famous, and like most bigger indie labels at that time, it had like Wax Trax had a personality, Played Against Sam in Europe had a personality, Warp had a personality, still does. SST had so like you could just buy the label, and you would know what you were going to get for the most part. And we carried that over into our own label to where just the label has a personality. And then when we started Audio Image, it right in the name, it was like, all right, this isn't just going to be EQs and compressors, And well, I say that's a much harder thing to do than what we do. To make a good model of an LA, 2A or whatever is a hard thing to do. And but to come up with new ways of approaching sound design, I suppose, and production, and to be a little more aggressive and risque, I suppose, than what was available at the time. And so yeah, I just brought all that forward to where the company has a personality rather than individual products defining it. Like you generally know we make a few synths, a few effects, whatever. You generally know that you're going to get something that is musical and hopefully I think good looking and easy for a musician to use. Most of our stuff you don't have to crack the manual. And that's just like my main that's my main thing. Adam is very big about writing very good manuals, and we do have good manuals, but I'd prefer you never have to look at it, and if you have to look at it, then I didn't do my job well. You should be able to look at the plugin and know what it does and know what every individual control does. There's nothing hidden, there's no multi, keyboard command, anything of that sort. I think that's why our shit translates so well to iOS, because I kind of there's a Frenchie just walked by.
Hey, I got six dogs, so that's one of them.
Those things crack me up. Anyhow, so it was just like kind of bringing that whole concept of where you kind of generally know, and as a result, we have customers that they don't even download the demo or listen to the audio files. They just see a new plugin come and they buy it, like I used to do with my favorite record labels, And so in general, it worked. I mean, we make fine livings. I'm not rich or anything, but
yeah,
I can afford things.
You can afford some toys. Amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
You can afford some soup as well, as I can see back there.
That's right. These make the. If you're into tape music like I am, and you do tape looping and all that, this is the best tensioner you can find. Like I use it to tension the tape loops and stuff.
Nice.
They're like the perfect weight, and they're wrapped in paper that's real durable, so they last forever.
That's great.
Big fan of the soup can tension.
That's awesome. I have so many questions. I'm not sure where to start. So you brought up. So let's keep on this for a second. So you feel personality is very important when it comes to making a good product and.
Well, yeah. At the end of the day, your customer's a musician. So they are a visual thinker in the first place, or a creative thinker, and. Obviously, they're making music instead of doing actuary tables or something, so they prefer that. And as a musician myself, I don't like to use things that look like Excel spreadsheets or, like a Melodyne is a good example. I'm in no way bagging on anybody else in the business. They made a killer product out the chute, and it's the best at what it does. But for me, as a musician, I do not like to look at it. And if I don't like to look at it, I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to, I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
I'll record the sound at a different, frequency. I don't need to go in and add or get it right the first time. I don't need to go in and fix it.
Yeah.
If I was doing audio repair or production of other people's music, obviously that would be a much bigger part of my tool set.
Yeah, it does have kind of a clinical aesthetic to it, doesn't it?
Exactly, and like stuff like that, they just don't appeal to me. So I don't think of it when I'm creating, when I'm in the process of creation. It doesn't pop into my head as something that is gonna, work with whatever I do. Well, when in fact it's one of the best tools made for, But so like just in general, I prefer stuff to it. I know that the person listening to your MP3 on their morning walk can't see what plugins you use. It doesn't fucking matter.
That's right.
But I got to make this stuff, and I want to have a pleasant environment while I do that.
Yeah. Well, I'm a strong believer that creating needs to come from the heart and not from the brain.
Yeah.
And that it seems like the best music really kind of comes from the emotion that you put into it. And
Sure, and all of that play. If you have to fight your tools, then it's going to affect your emotions.
yeah,
All of that all works together to make a dope track. At the end of the day, your experiences, the environment you're in when you're making them, and our products are a part of that environment. So, maybe that you make the best sounding plugin in the world. If it's ugly, it's not going in my folder. I just that sounds petty and trite, but I think a lot of people. What was that chorus plugin that came out a couple days ago? Did you see that?
no,
He did it. Oh, he did. It's up on Music Radar. It just went up yesterday or the day before, I think. He put out this free chorus plugin, and it looks like it was made with a MySpace kit. Like it's super old school graphics, and all the press about it was trying so hard to not say that. It's cracking me up. I couldn't tell if the guy's doing it ironically or if that's how he wanted it to look. Like I honestly can't tell. The other stuff he's done looks like that too. So I think I like to think it's ironic, which makes it a good joke. But if he'd like this, this looks fucking great, then it's a little bit sad. But it's still like, I mean, the free plugin, so who gives a shit? Like obviously he made something and gave it away, and that's cool.
Yeah.
But it was cracking me up, some of the conversations I was seeing about that plugin. And like other people trying to figure out if it's ironic.
And what are your thoughts?
It's called it's a 4-channel compressor, or I mean a chorus or something. I forget what it's called, like chorus or something.
And what are your thoughts on like skeuomorphic design versus like vector-based design?
It served a purpose early on. I'm guilty as anybody, for doing skew stuff, but nowadays it's gotten where it's a parody of itself. Like early on, people didn't necessarily know what plugins were, and this looks just like this thing I have in the rack, and I know how to use it. I don't have to think at all. And there's still a place for it here and there, but I like, my favorite is, and it's hard to do really well, is the semi-skeuomorphic stuff like Native Instruments does, where the stuff has a little bit of depth, but it's not part of the character. It's just to make it pop out of the screen so you can see it better and whatnot. And that I appreciate. That's very difficult to do. And it's a pain in the ass because you're coding a lot of procedural graphics around a bitmap, or you have to create a knob procedurally that's skeuomorphic, which is even harder. And it's a difficult task that requires the designer and the people coding the UI to work really closely together. So I really appreciate Native Instruments for really taking that home. Like what is the name of? I can't remember. Form, I think, that granular sample player thingy that they put out for Complete is probably the best example of that. Is really nice mixture of skeuomorphic and flat. And yeah, that's like the being able to pull that off and make it attractive and useful is the mark of someone that's really on the ball as far as design goes. But for like just to make something that looks like unless you're cloning it exactly, to randomly make Optimus Prime's taint, it's just it's just dumb. It's a waste of time. You're stuck with these assets that you can't resize, and it's just that's all personal taste. And when we're talking about design, we're talking about subjective opinions. There's plenty of plugins I use daily that are skeuomorphic, and I don't give them a second thought. So obviously they did something right. Personally, it's like I'll occasionally, when I'm actually looking, I have next to this window, I have Illustrator open. I'm working on our next product, and I have, through the course of this design process, put drop shadows under a couple things and then deleted them, and then I'm like, it's kind of asking for a little depth, but I'm I'm so vocal in my anti-skew
Mm-hmm.
rants that if I put it in, I know I'd be opening myself up to a whole lot of, peanut gallery comments. And it's just like, all right, I don't really need a drop. Does it really need a drop shadow, or does
Yeah.
it just want it? It's like doing a big design especially, is like having a toddler around that has no object permanence. They don't,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
they don't, it doesn't know what it wants exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
gotta guide it.
And
I mean,
and
I'll let it tell me what it needs. If something has to be skew, it's going to be skew, and
yeah.
that's. I have been easy. I went fully flat for a couple of years,
Yeah.
and I have been easing back a little bit. Like I've started putting gradients and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Especially now that Windows is high DPI, I can get a little more, because gradients on Windows always just look awful with the banding.
Okay.
So I never really liked them that much. But to do the background in a nice smooth gradient, if I can pull that off, I'll do it. I've done it in our last 2 products.
Nice. So
Yeah,
so
it's tough to pull it though.
yeah, I can imagine. So tell me a little bit about your creation process with Atom. So when you're thinking
Okay.
about a product, you have obviously a design element to it. Adam may have his ideas in terms of the actual DSP. How does that kind of come together in terms of bringing that into one cohesive vision? How does it
Well,
start?
we have our process is we've worked together a long time now.
Mm-hmm.
17 years, I think, 18 years, something like that. It's a while, and so we kind of got a Vulcan mind meld going. We have a Slack channel that's just ideas. So anytime one of us has an idea, we drop it in there, and every once in a while we go and scroll back. But it's really just more to wedge it in your brain. We actually don't look at the channel very often, or I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Once I've written it, I generally can remember it.
Uh-huh.
When we finish a product, we usually take a couple weeks off. I have to deal with the marketing and all that, and he needs to decompress, because like most of the final burn to the end is fixing bugs and stuff, and it's like it's a lot of work, and he needs some time after that. And then after those couple weeks or month or whatever have passed by, we start talking about what the next one is, and it's kind of what is interesting either of us at any given point. After we've put out 45 software products and 30 Eurorack or 25 Eurorack modules, so we have a pretty good handle on what is gonna sell, like what style of product is gonna sell. So whether we need income or not affects that. Like if the last 2 things we did were just updates don't make a lot of money. A new product makes a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So are we going to do an update or a new product? If we need money, we'll probably do a new product. If we're coasting fine, we may consider doing a major update to something or whatever.
I see.
So once we have the idea done, then I start, we'll talk about what its vibe is going to be. Like for the next thing we're doing, when we did our granular synth Quanta last year, he came up with I wanted to have like a sidecar oscillator in it that could inject right into the grain engine, just because that way you don't even need to load a sample. You got a granular synth with that's where an oscillator is providing the sample, and it created some new things I'd never seen before. And but the oscillator he came up with was really good, and I ended up using Quanta as a monosynth a lot.
Wow.
A single oscillator monosynth, which I love the sound of, like Yamaha CS5, that sort of thing. I love. So, and then we got to thinking that we should, we had a monosynth product, or have a monosynth product basic that I had made for educational market. And we got to talking about removing that from the catalog and replacing it with a proper subtractive synth, starting with Quanta's oscillators. So that's what we're actually in the design process right now, where we're going through the tool bag and seeing how we want it to sound. Like, do we want it to be an aggressive thing, like for EDM, like Phase Plant or Serum, or do we want it to be a smooth, warm synth? What I would prefer for my own music. Generally, we'll make stuff for what we make. That's usually the rule. We don't, if we're not going to use it, we don't make it. And then so we get all that in a basket, and then we kind of shake it and see what we have. I will generally, during the course of that, do UI mock-ups, and then we'll kind of ease those into the, I keep looking to the side here because I'm looking at the mock-up I'm doing right now while I'm telling you this. And so that kind of falls to me, the flow of it, and the general vibe that the product's going to carry. Like Quanta had a specific goal, and that's to treat granular like subtractive, because like the vast majority of granular synths are kind of, they accentuate the granular aspect, and it's difficult to just drop them in a song. And I want a Quanta, something you can grab, make it a little grainy, and go. And so we greatly simplified the granular synthesis process for that product. And I'm trying to make this as a sister product to that, so it's going to be a greatly simplified, version of what Serum and Massive and Faceplant and products like that accomplish. And so it's mostly just sitting around and thinking. That's why I have a sofa in my room. Is this, like, my office could be full of musical instruments, but I have to have a sofa so I can just sit and stare at the ceiling and think. I need a lot of room for pacing. I go out on the back porch and pace around the pool a lot, and in that I'm building it in my head and imagining myself using it and trying to come up with interesting things. Adam, in the meantime, is like, we have to invent something for every product. So he'll go through and find all the cases of prior art for that. In this case, we want a particular kind of oscillator. So he's going through and all his oscillator tomes and putting together the bits and pieces that will make the result we want. And so on and so forth. And then once we actually start, we make a project in JUCE, put it in our repository, and I start coding the UI. And generally we've decided that it's going to be like this. I've made a full mock-up in Illustrator, and then I'll move into JUCE and start coding the UI, and while he's putting together the DSP and whatnot. So he actually usually starts that, because he'll make the parameter list and all the all the enums and whatnot, so that I have them ready. I don't have to make dummy knobs. I can actually have the parameter there. The values are all right, so I can actually do my job, which is design, and not have to worry about coding up a lot of shit. And so he will he puts a project in the repository that already has the parameters and everything, so we can just start coding the UI.
Nice.
I forgot I can actually get pretty technical on this. Usually I'm like, I make it some blue, In the middle of me talking, I'm like, talk about code. I'm actually not great at code, but I'm good at doing JUCE UIs. That's like JUCE UI code. I'm all over that, but when you get outside of that, I start to get a little lost.
And do you feel that JUCE, in terms of the UI, offers a lot of flexibility, or do you feel that you're always trying to wrangle with it, or where do you feel?
At first, I fought it a lot, because the way it's presented to you is as a just start using their stuff and put it together and make your product, and then you end up with a JUCE plugin. It looks like JUCE. The text, let's say, that's actually what I fought with the most, is getting the fonts to where you couldn't tell it was a JUCE plugin from looking at it. And fighting with the look and feel class, which is like, the look and feel has had so much stuff added to it over the years. By different people, so like some controls have a lot of look and feel access, and some have like one or two things. Like the call out boxes are a goddamn nightmare, but knobs, I can do anything, so it's like various stuff like that. After the first couple products that we did with JUCE, I started just coding everything. So I'll use all their classes. I use the button class and the slider class and everything, but I do all the graphics in the controls paint. And I hardly use, like, I use look and feel to store all our colors, and some behaviors, and then like the overall font and that sort of thing, and to tame all the drop down menus and all that. But for the actual controls, I generally I have my own classes that I've made that override theirs.
Nice.
It's just it's hard to get something that's very general to do something specific. You know, by the same token, the nice thing about JUCE is that I can load it up, throw in there, follow their tutorials, and throw in controls and get them to look a little bit like my own and look and feel, and ship a product, and it'll be fine.
Nice.
JUCE is great for that. For the way we work, the main thing we rely on JUCE for is the fact that we can deploy to so many platforms, and that they take care of Pro Tools, they take care of iOS. They worry about all the little shit, so I can concentrate on just making a good plugin. And that's really the only way to really make a solid living in this business is to have as many possible targets for your product as possible. And JUCE is the best there is for that. I say that not having a lot of experience, and to just do it at the base level VST and then make your own AX, your own iOS, you're not going to make any. You're not going to be able to make enough products to make money and concentrate on on the products themselves. You're going to spend all your time riding herd on SDKs.
Yeah, that's right.
That's for small shops. If you're a big shop, you need a team with a capital T for that. I wouldn't know anything about it.
And speaking of multiple targets, so you've been quite active in the iOS market, and there's been a lot of talk for some time about mobile apps and that they're going to take over desktop. And what are your feelings on that?
Well, I like the nice thing about the iOS environment. It was a virgin field. Like 2 years ago, there was GarageBand and a couple others, and that was that, or 3 years ago. And so you ended up with products like 8-Matrix and AUM, which somebody made to solve a problem they were having, or to create a scenario where they could explore some new creative avenues. And those have gotten really popular: Audio Bus, AUM, 8-Matrix. So you have these 3 big hosts that are entirely modular. They're what you make them. They're not DAWs at all. They're mixers, essentially. And I got really excited about that. And if you look at my Instagram, you see a lot of me using AOM to make music. It's all real time, of course, but within that context. And so I started using AOM, and then I was like, man, I wish I could just bang out JUCE. It has a checkbox. I can make iOS. It's nowhere near that simple, but at the time I was naive, and I was like, oh shit, it builds and works fine, let's rock this. And it turned out to be we were the first I don't want to say real company, but we were the first company with a long track record to really embrace AUV3 and ship just like we ship for everything else. The vast majority of our products are identical. It's the same exact code. I just built it for iOS. Some of them, like Quanta, and so we had to dumb down a little bit because they use resources that iOS simply doesn't possess. So like there's a voice limit on Quanta, 6 voices on iOS. iOS would just come to a standstill trying to do 15 voices of a 1,000 grain. Or Enso, the Enso desktop version, which Enso's a loop version, you're not familiar with it, it can go for like 10 minutes, and iOS just doesn't have the RAM to do that. So we had to shorten that. But for the most part, they're identical. It didn't start out that way. I was forking things to do with iOS, but with iOS 11, picked up a lot of features to where I could use a common preset manager. And like the presets for the iOS versions work on the desktop and vice versa. Like you can use handoff and copy from one to the other. It's crazy.
Nice.
So it's like in that respect now, as far as I'm concerned, it's just one more target. I don't use Pro Tools. I don't care about Pro Tools. We sell AAX plugins.
Yeah.
So uh, I approach iOS the same way. It's just one more target, like doing 3264-bit. We don't, other than me allowing for the context, like in the preset manager and stuff, you wouldn't see as a consumer. I generally, uh, I design with the thought that the user could be using either a mouse or his finger, her finger, their finger, and that it needs to be visible at small and big sizes. You need to be able to tell what's going on, so that the plugin itself doesn't really care what context it's running in. It's going to provide an experience that's similar across all devices. For that reason, I don't use sliders, because they suck on with your finger. Like going up on a vertical slider on a touch screen is awful, because your finger bunches up and you can't do it accurately. I don't ever use right click for anything. I don't use any modifier keys for anything, because then I don't have to think about how to accomplish the same thing in iOS. It just works.
I see.
And that's like doing that kind of design at the front makes porting much easier. There's nothing special I have to allow for in iOS or any other DAW, but the downside is that we can't do crafty little things like right click on this, to make it, do something, or stuff like that. The best I can do is long press, double click, that sort of thing. But and there's no like hover states, none of that, which actually makes the front end design easier. Like if I set these strict limits, I can't have hover states, can't have right click, can't have, modifier keys, and no vertical sliders. Then if those are the bounds I'm working within, then I don't have to like, oh man, I really wish I had this thing on here that I don't have here. Never have to worry about that.
Yeah.
So we designed to a lowest common denominator that includes an iPad.
Nice.
But that's a result of having learned all that over like the first couple. It was like, Jesus Christ, what a hot mess. But now it's a matter of course. I don't even really think about it.
And what about the price? What about the price point between iOS and?
That's smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, that took like some real soul searching there, because we charge what we charge. We're less expensive than most companies with our kind of catalog. But by the same token, you don't have people manning the phones 24/7. I can't charge for something I can't give them, like I can't charge you $190 for something when you want to be able to call and say, how do I get this to work? I'm not going to answer my phone because it's all fucking robocalls. So we price accordingly. We price what we need to make to keep making, basically.
Nice.
So with iOS, obviously a $59 plugin, we're going to sell one. We're not going to sell any. The context doesn't have the ecosystem that Windows and Mac OS have. It doesn't have a easy pathway to record a song, record your vocals and guitar, mix it well, commercial quality, and put it out. Whereas both a Windows machine and a Mac OS machine can do that easily. They're built for it. Taking that into account, even though the product is identical, you are not getting the full experience that having our products run in Pro Tools would provide you. So I can't, in good faith, charge you the same. I just can't. Couple that with the fact that that people, Apple, for whatever reason, has created a scenario where race to the bottom is a thing. And it's I have mathematical proof that pricing below equal similar products will mean you'll sell more than them. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
So we just came up with a policy of just lopping off it and seeing what that got us, because I don't have a boss. It's me. I can change it whenever I want if I don't feel it's working, So there's no, police are going to come to my house if I decide to change the price by $1. So I tend to fiddle with the iOS prices a little bit. I had talked to another developer that was in a similar scenario as we were, and he and I agreed to. I can't say agreed. That's a violation of RICO. But I had a thought of fiddling with our prices and seeing where a comfort level was.
Yeah.
And so we've been doing that for a few months, and
SWAT team's at your door.
as it turned, yeah, here comes the fucking FBI to put me on racketeering charges. That's price fixing. You can't do that. But we were discussing like if we all kind of tried to move the ecosystem in a, because you end up with a lot of people on iOS that just buy it because it's cheap. Like, oh, this looks like fun looper. I know what a looper is, you know, and they buy it. And so it's a very complex product. It's most of our products are super simple and it's obvious, and so meets a particular need for people that have to do things this particular way. And it's fairly complex. So actually I've had to do more support for that product than all of our others combined since it came out. Just because people just buy it for cheap on iOS and they don't understand what they've got. They think it's going to be like Loopy or something like that, and it's not at all. It clones a tape looper, you know, so it's a complex process. So long story short, I'd love to charge the same on iOS, but they're not getting, like, if you buy the desktop version, you've got it on both Mac and Windows. You've got it in 4 formats in 2-bit depths, and it'll work forever, you know, whereas iOS is subject to Apple's whims. You buy that one. We have no way to sell you that one with the desktop products. We have no way to sell you the desktop products with that one. It is its own entity. So I kind of work it out the way you would buy one of the other 10 formats we sell. You only get one, so it's a tenth the cost. It just worked out that way. Like I said, we've been fiddling with the prices a little bit, but on the whole, we were right the first time. iOS sells, at the end of the day, it holds its weight. You know, we make a fair chunk of our yearly income from that format alone. So if I sold any of the other formats, I think that they would do what iOS AUV3 does. So it's, as a single format, is probably our largest user base is iOS users at this point. And so the money works out fine. It smarts a little bit to lap that zero off when you just work for 6 months on something, you know, 10 hours a day, but at the end of the day, it works out good, you know. So I got no complaints.
And have you seen the shift in terms of the number of sales that you got on your desktop apps versus iOS apps? Have you seen a shift in that in recent years, or does it maintain?
Well, iOS outsells desktop about 8-1.
Okay.
In numbers. That was from the jump. When we released the first iOS plugin, it did 8 times what its desktop version had done, almost immediately. So, and it's fairly consistent over. I think everybody that was going to be an iOS musician pretty much is by now. A lot of people like that. Like if you're working GarageBand and you use audio damage plugins in GarageBand, you can send the project to Logic, and if you own the desktop versions, they just show up in their spots where they were. And a lot of people like that sort of behavior. But it's kind of an additional tool to the desktop environment. It's not something that, at least at this point, can replace it. And once it can, it's just another desktop. So at that point, it's not worth talking about. So it's kind of in a weird spot right now. I don't see the numbers growing hugely in the next while. But they are huge already, so no complaints there.
And do you feel the pirating aspect has to do with it as well?
I don't really put much thought into that, to be honest with you. Like our products don't have DRM at all, so obviously that's how. That's what I think about pirates. Yeah, fuck you. Do your worst. But it's real hard to stuff. Boy, you're a fucking ace hacker there. really did your mama proud on that one. But who gives a shit? My theory is that there's people that don't pay for stuff and people that pay for stuff, and people that pay for stuff want good stuff, and they want to be able to talk to me if they have a problem, and they want us to keep making stuff. And there's enough of those people to allow me to live and make stuff for a living. So so beyond that, I don't think about it. There is almost no Python on iOS, obviously. I think that the price makes things a bit disposable. Like someone will buy something, and if it doesn't work, they don't ever tell me. So I end up not knowing about some problems. But whereas on desktop, I will regularly get people that write us that pirated the product and want support. I'm like, well, that takes some brass there, but like a decade. I can smell them out pretty quickly. I generally don't even need to look in the customer database. I can tell right away. Just the way someone asks their questions.
Amazing.
But yeah, that's always made me laugh. But
that's my dog. She's
got a leg thumping situation.
The funny thing is she doesn't do that unless I'm having a conversation with somebody.
That the way of it. Yeah, I have to shut my door so my cat doesn't come in here, yell at me while it's going. Yeah, I don't like. Long story short, I don't give a shit about piracy. There isn't any on iOS to speak of, at least not enough to have a number for. And while it exists on desktop, it doesn't really. You know, I'd like there not to be, but we spent so many years fighting it tooth and nail to no visible effect that I don't want to say I conceded the battle, but I stopped giving any sort of remote fuck about it. You know, and our numbers didn't change at all. We took all our DRM out in 2012, 2013, took all the reg code shit out, and the one thing I do get that's funny is people writing to say they bought something and there was no place to put in a reg code, and it seems to work fine, but is there a problem? We get that pretty frequently because of the bigger companies, we're really the only one that doesn't have but at the end of the day, it's a happier customer, and I don't care about people that stole it. I don't give a shit about them. I care about the people that bought it. And if they are having problems because of copy protection, they're paying the price for the people that stole it. And it's okay for me to pay that price, but they shouldn't have to. You know why? That's if it fucks with their experience. So, but the corollary of that is that I get people writing thinking that they didn't install it right because it's so unusual. You know, that's where we're at though. Obviously, we do fine, so I'm not too concerned about it at this point.
Do you feel that the strongest way to combat that is to build a great product?
I think there's a point where it's diminishing returns. I mean, Logic X doesn't have copy protection. You have to sign in to get updates, but you can just, if you got a friend that bought Logic X, you can just put it on your machine and use it unrestricted. And that does not affect the ability of Apple to make money off of Logic, you know? So, and obviously I have my problems with that, but they're largely technical. As a creative environment, it's one of the best there is. And so that being the case, it's a bit of a post hoc or propter hoc fallacy because, you know, macOS is inherently locked down. But at the end of the day, this is a major product that has no copy protection. And Lives is almost, Ableton Lives is almost, you know, transparent. You just log in the app and that's that. Bitwig is the same way. So you don't really notice the protections that are there. And that's the way it should be. As long as the customer never really knows, then or doesn't have to think about it at all. It's not like some stuff where you have to log in repeatedly. I hate that. Like where it times out and you have to re-log in. That kind of shit, I'll just stop using it. I don't care. You know, it's like you're punishing me for someone else's bullshit. I just not use your shit, you know. And like the more abusive you make it, the more you end up worrying about that, and then not the product. Like how to make the product safe. Does it even need to be safe if it's no fun to use? You know.
That's right.
You know, it's just I don't know. I've had a lot of discussions about this over the years because obviously I'm fairly opinionated on it. But I find that the people that spend the most, that have successful copy protection that works, spend a lot of time thinking about it and dealing with it and researching it and finding all the cracks out there and dealing with them. I spend that time living my life.
Yeah.
So, like, if that's your hobby, finding and perfecting, you know, copy protection holes, then and you enjoy that, God bless. But that's not for me. I got shit to do.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, no, I don't think that the product itself is. Well, I don't really even remember what the question was.
I don't either. So obviously there are a lot of indie developers out there.
Oh, you cut out for a second there.
There are a lot of indie developers out there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of discussion in terms of how to make a living as an indie developer.
I keep losing your audio.
Do you?
I lost you after discussion.
So there's a lot of discussion. Where I lost my thoughts there. Hold on a second. So there are a lot of independent developers out there, and there's a lot of discussion in terms of how to make money and how to make a living as an independent developer. What do you think that a lot of indie developers are missing in terms of being able to make a living off of this?
Well, they should have started 15 years ago. Barring that, I think that there's a general, from what I've seen for people discussing it, there's a general theory that if you just put it out there, they'll show up. But that doesn't really play out in this because you're a needle in a haystack, and the customer just sees the haystack and he's going to grab the first needle he finds. If it's yours, that's awesome. But early on, you have to really talk people into and however you choose to do that promotion. I'm terrible at promoting stuff, but you know, by the time I've tweeted and Instagrammed about it, I've already moved on. So I have to actually to really pay attention to that. But it's like any product that you have to get it in front of the people that are likely to use it and tell them why. And how you go about that. There's a lot of ways to skin that cat, but speaking strictly for us, because of the way in which we did the company in the early days, as I was speaking before about the record label concept, we have a dedicated group of customers that so we can kind of rely on that for, like, we know we're going to make this when we put this out, and we can plan for that. Without having that, I honestly am not entirely sure how one would approach it. If you make good shit, it's gonna get out there, but that's really, at the end of the day, if it's a good product, it will eventually, but paying the rent while eventually is happening is a problem, and this is a business that, to make a good product, requires a lot of time and dedication, and that's hard to do when you're going to work at Subway during the day, or whatever. So I think it's the same as with any business, is that you go all in and do your best, and either the market will be happy with it or they won't. I think that's the same about anything. If a coffee shop opens up and it's pretty, but their coffee sucks, they're not going to do well. By the same token, if they got really good coffee, but they're in the ass end of the parking lot that's in an empty strip mall 4 blocks over, you'll still go because it's good fucking coffee. but you got to find out about it if you don't know it's there, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that in that respect, this business is it's unique in as much as most of us are musicians and we're dealing with musicians, but that makes it its own thing. But on the whole, I think that business is business at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know, you make a good product and promote it, and if the consumer base agrees with you, then you'll be able to make another one. You know, it's not brain surgery. You know, a lot of people have been doing business for a couple
yeah.
set in stone.
Yeah.
You know, that said, I do stumble through it. You know, it took us quite a few years, and I think the best advice I can give to somebody starting out is that it's not going to happen overnight. So rarely do you hit it over the fence on the first try. And even if you do, you don't have the resources necessary to tell people that you did it. You know, unless someone was there videotaping it, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So, so to stick with it, like Audio Damage was around for 6 years before I got a paycheck. You know, it barely paid for itself for the first 3 years. And in point of fact, Adam, who had more income than I was a musician. I didn't have fucking money at all. Adam had a real job. Adam actually, you know, financially supported the company for the first few years of its life. So it did take us a while, and that was without hardly any competition. You know, we were a market of like a couple dozen. By the time we got rolling. So now there's, you know, hundreds of plugin companies, if not thousands.
Yeah.
So there's not as many plugin companies as there are Eurorack companies. So that's something to think about. For a market that's 100 times the size, there's less companies.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is. There's a reason we stopped doing that. But in any case, I think at the end of the day, you know, like most small businesses don't do well early on, and it's your ability to muscle through that. You know, I worked 2 or 3 jobs until, you know, about 2007, 2006, when we were really able to pay ourselves. And then it was probably 2011 before I started making enough money to where I didn't have to worry about, we weren't bouncing, you know, or we weren't batting credit card bills back to other credit cards, you know, shit like that. Probably about 2011. So it took, say, 10 years to make a living, like a solid middle class living doing this. And I don't make a lot. Luckily, there's been no inflation for the last decade, but I don't make a lot more than I did in 2011. So I've gotten better at dealing with what we make and making it work for me. Like I didn't write a check for this. You know, I have very good credit, and Sweetwater did no interest. You know, so
nice.
So it's not like I went to Guitar Center and dropped $100 bills on the table and said, "Give me one of those." You know, I could not do that. You know, so it's not a especially lucrative business to begin with, and another thing that helps us a lot is that we have a very large product base. Like, you know, we have now 45 catalog numbers. So obviously only 15 or so are available at any given time. But because we have a broad swath and it's relevant to current styles of music, then that's actually a good point. If you make a specific EQ or a compressor, you kind of have to hope it works in modern music. But if you make something that's new, and then it will inherently work in modern music because it's modern. So I don't like to clone. Like, we're going to make the perfect, like Valhalla is the best at that. There's no reason to, or Universal Audio, there's no reason to do it because they do it so well. Like Sean just spent 4 years going through with a magnifying glass on tape delays to make Valhalla delay, and there's no point in us approaching that at all. A, I don't have that kind of OCD, and B, it would be counterproductive for us to do it. We need, but to have a nice big swath of modern relevant plugins will ensure it's like a low pass filter on your income. You're always going to do something, and as long as you're always doing something, you can plan your life accordingly.
Yeah.
So every once in a while we get a nice big bump when we have a product out, but on the whole, our idle is what we live on. So
Nice.
yeah. Oh yeah, I am in no way complaining. The fact that I can sit in this room and just think about knobs all day, it's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
It's the best job ever for me.
Not a bad job at all, is it?
No, I'm not complaining.